This is a row, but what we're doing with this movement is I'm having him raise his elbows as high as he can so he actually attack a lot more of the rhomboid, the middle of the back area. And at the front, at the full extension part, I want him to actually pull his lats out, kind of like what we call a cobra stretch. Really open his back and probably pull out those lats out the spinal erectors there. Good, elbows high.
Okay, this is an interesting movement. There's some good stuff here, maybe some not so good stuff here. The rounding of the back is good and bad. Number one is he's not chest supported. So if he was chest supported, like a T-bar row, for example, or a machine that had a chest pad, then he could spread his shoulders forward and get a lot more stretch in the upper back without jeopardizing his lower back. But here, there's a certain amount of risk to the lower back because he's unsupported. Okay, that's number one. Number two is by keeping these elbows wide, he's involving slightly more rear deltoids. In fact, you can experiment with this yourself, and you'll actually see that you'll feel more. This is the pathway of the rear deltoid. If you were to drop this down a little bit, he would get away from the rear deltoid pathway. And what's pulling the shoulders back, what's pulling the scapula back, is the rhomboids, teres major, teres minor, infraspinatus, trapezius. So when you do your rowing movement, what matters less in terms of where your elbows are is whether you're pulling your shoulders back, because the muscles that pull the shoulders back don't connect to the arms, and the muscles that connect to the arms don't connect to the shoulders. So when you're doing a rowing movement, what really matters is that your shoulders are going forward and your shoulders are going back, which is why I typically recommend that people do exercises like this that are two-armed rowing exercises where you can bring both shoulders back as opposed to one-arm rowing exercises, which tend to rotate your whole torso. It's hard to pinch those, to squeeze those inner back muscles when one of the shoulders stays forward and only the other one comes back.
Good. Again, squeeze my hand in here. Squeeze.
Yeah. Trapezius, teres major, these are all the muscles in here. When the lats are working, they're pulling down and in and down, right? So that's why I always say, when you're working your back, you're really talking about two separate movements. You're talking about a resistance that comes from the front to work the upper back, and a resistance that comes from the side and above to work the lats.
There you go. Do it again. Squeeze my hand. Chest up. One more. Chest up. Good.
When I do some coaching and we say, we want to work this particular muscle, the very first question you say is, what does that muscle do? What's its function, right? And you can identify its function easily by saying, what action would cause the insertion of that muscle to move as far away from the origin as possible and then as close to the origin as possible? What causes elongation and contraction of that muscle? That defines the movement. Well, once you know the movement, then you say, let's pick a resistance that runs opposite to the movement. That's how you choose exercises. That's how all of this works. If you were going to look at the bicep, you'd say, what does the bicep do? It bends the elbow. It creates an elongating and a shortening when you open up. Oh, okay, well then let's use a resistance that does the opposite of that movement. That's why I say a pull down doesn't run opposite the elongation of that muscle. What you want to do is get the insertion of the muscle on the upper arm bone to move as far away from the spine as possible. Well, how do you do that? By moving it to the side, laterally and up, right? If you're going straight up, you're not moving away from the spine, right? You might be moving away from the hips, but you're not moving away from the spine. So if you want to move away from the spine, in the diagonal line of those movements, you go opposite the insertion along the path of those muscles, and you go up and out to the side, and the resistance comes from the opposite side.